There's been a lot of press coverage and speculation and discussion of a manifesto. I've seen nothing like a Unabomber-style manifesto.
Well, Vance Bolter has been captured, the Minnesota political assassin, but now we're being told there was no manifesto?
The manifesto and the information that we have received, we are working diligently on that.
But you just heard in that last clip, they're working on the manifesto as far as digging through the information. So in this video, we're going to dig into the new information of the not manifesto. Now, before we start the video, make sure to please like the video. It is by far the #1 way you guys can help this channel, but it also helps others see the videos as well, and I think people need to see what's happening right now. Let's dig into it.
As I said, with respect to the other two potential victims, I think it's up to them whether they want to publicly identify themselves. As I said, it wouldn't surprise me if they do. They're elected officials, but that's their right. Obviously, they may have families and children and privacy interests that they need to sort through, so I'll let them do that. With respect to the potential motive, let me say this. There's been a lot of press coverage and speculation and discussion of a manifesto. I've seen nothing like a Unabomber-style manifesto.
Now, super quick, this is what a manifesto is according to dictionary.cambridge.org. A written statement of a person or group's beliefs, aims, and policies, especially their political beliefs. Let's continue.
In his writings, he had many, many notebooks full of plans, lists of names, surveillance, efforts that he took to surveil and locate the home addresses and family members' relationships with these elected officials. But I have not seen anything involving some sort of political screed or manifesto that would clearly identify what motivated him. Obviously, his primary motive was to go out and murder people. Now, they were all elected officials. They were all Democrats. Beyond that, I think it's just way too speculative for anyone who has reviewed these materials to know and to say what was motivating him in terms of ideology or specific issues. There's a lot of...
For abortion rights supporters?
There were some abortion rights supporters, I believe, on the list. But again, there was dozens and dozens and dozens of names on, hundreds of pages of documents that were recovered.
Okay, so now we're being told there is no manifesto. Now we're going to cross-reference the clip I showed you at the very beginning where they talk about a manifesto.
One more question. Can you talk a little bit more about the manifesto and what kind of motivation it might be? There might be. We're told that there might be some pro-choice lawmakers on this manifesto, and that has anything to do with the motivation here?
At this point in time, it would be premature. The question was, is the manifesto and the information that we have received, is their motivations? We are working diligently on that. There's certainly some indications within that, but there's not specifics enough. We have been, this is a very active and fluid investigation. Throughout the day, as you've been waiting, and these teams have been out working out in the field, and they have been gathering more documents and information, so it would be premature for me at this point to really say exactly what the motivation might be from these writings, but we will be continuing to work on that and provide that information.
Now, if you haven't already, make sure to please subscribe to my channel so I can update you on this case and other cases like this around the United States. Let's continue. So, when you compare both of the clips, they both say we don't know the exact motive or intention. They both admit that this is politically charged. However, in one clip, there's no denial of the manifesto. In this clip, the most recent clip, there is a denial of a manifesto. Let's continue with some new information.
Belter then traveled to Brooklyn Park, Minnesota, and the home of Minnesota State Representative Melissa Hortman. At approximately 3:30 a.m., Belter arrived at Representative Hortman's house in his black SUV with the police license plates. He parked in the driveway and left the emergency lights on his SUV flashing, as if he was a police officer. Belter approached Representative Hortman's home, again dressed as a police officer, wearing the tactical vest and body armor, and wearing that hyper-realistic mask. He was armed and carrying a flashlight. Before he entered the home, 2 Brooklyn Park police officers arrived at the scene. They too had been dispatched to check on Representative Hortman after learning of the shooting of Senator Hoffman. When they arrived at the scene, they saw Belter's black SUV parked in the driveway with the emergency lights flashing, and they saw Belter standing in front of the house, several feet from the door. When Belter saw the officers get out of the car, he drew his weapon and began firing. He rushed into the house through the front door, firing into it. He repeatedly fired into the house, and when he entered, he murdered Representative Hortman and her husband, Mark.
So this is all brand new information. The way this was initially being presented is that the cops showed up after the fact when the lawmaker was taken out and her husband. But it turns out he actually engaged officers at the exact same time he ran into the house. That's where he took out the lawmaker and her husband and then rushed out the back. Now, the good thing is the police officers definitely saved a ton of other lives, because wait until you hear how many firearms this guy had.
The Brooklyn Park police officers fired at Belter as he rushed into the home, but he escaped into the home and out the back. Officers recovered Belter's 9mm Beretta, along with the body armor and the mask, behind the home along his path of flight when he fled on foot. They later searched Belter's car, where they found 5 more firearms, including assault-style rifles and a large quantity of ammunition. Belter also had in his car notebooks containing a list of more than 45 Minnesota state and federal elected officials, including Representative Hortman.
So again, this is the same press conference where they're talking about there is no manifesto. However, there was a very hefty hit list. Now the question is, how did he get the hit list? Why did he decide to put people on the hit list? We know they were all Democrats. Check this out.
Now, Belter planned his attack carefully. He researched his victims and their families. He used the internet and other tools to find their addresses and names, the names of their family members. He conducted surveillance of their homes and took notes about the location of their homes. He also prepared in other ways. He concealed himself as a police officer, outfitting his black SUV with police lights and a police license plate, wearing a black tactical vest and body armor, carrying a police flashlight and a handgun. And of course he wore that hyper-realistic silicone mask as seen on the surveillance videos. The video of his arrival and shooting of Senator Hoffman is truly chilling. Again, it's no exaggeration to say this is the stuff of nightmares.
Okay, so this is the most recent update as far as a press conference and the new information that's being given out to the public. Now, there seems to be a lot of people upset as far as what the charges are. We're going to dig into that for a second.
Well, the difference between first and second degree murder in Minnesota is premeditation. And Dana, you can live 50 years and not see more premeditation than you have in this case. So they're going to charge just enough to keep him in custody, no bond, and then the grand jury is definitely going to charge him with murder in the first degree. What's important is you can get life without parole. The other thing to look out for, though, is there a federal nexus? The feds still have the death penalty. Minnesota does not. I heard from a Republican lawmaker last night whose name was on his list.
So this is not the first time we've seen this in the United States. You have state laws and federal laws. Actually, we saw this rather recent with the terror attack that happened in Boulder, Colorado. The man throwing Molotov cocktails. The federal government wanted to possibly charge this guy with terror charges, but the state of Colorado does not have that ability. So I'm just trying to show you guys, every once in a while we get these gaps in laws and policies where federal sometimes has to step in with bigger charges.
So it may be terror on both sides. This was a Republican lawmaker. He killed a Democrat, tried to kill another Democrat. I would look out for federal charges, so he could be eligible for the death penalty.
Okay.
Now, I haven't heard anything as far as terror charges, but what we do know is that this man will most likely be hit with the books. Every single charge he can get, he probably will. But let's continue on with as far as how he was captured. I find this rather interesting as well.
He had been on the run for more than 40 hours, was arrested about 50 miles or so to the southwest of where the attacks took place. And it was just a few miles from his home. Now, they were first called back to that area when they identified a vehicle that they suspected he had been driving after the attacks. It was abandoned along a roadway there. And then while there, a resident provided them with a tip saying that they saw them running through the woods. And that's when they initiated this massive search and were able to pinpoint him. They tell us that they also used drones as well as a chopper, infrared technology to find out exactly where he was, and then just inch by inch moved in until they finally closed that circle around it.
Everything about this case takes a different turn as far as who this man is, because if you guys remember at the very beginning of all of this, he engaged police officers, and thankfully nobody was hurt as far as law enforcement, but he managed to get away. Again, almost 48 hours later, they captured him. But when they found him, I find it rather interesting, he was not willing to engage officers, and that's a good thing. But I'm just trying to show you guys the contrast of how he gives up so peacefully, but at the very beginning of all of this, he started off so violent. It really makes you wonder.
There was a state representative, Democratic leader of the state legislature in Minnesota killed over the weekend, a state senator shot. How would you describe the current political atmosphere in this country this morning?
I feel like Trump has really popped the lid off the rhetoric and the sense of hate and violence and promoted this type of an environment. It's profoundly disturbing for all of us. We have seen increased threats across the country. You're probably familiar with the pizza threats. We've seen more of that where pizzas or other food is delivered to people's families that they haven't ordered, just to say from the right wing, we know who you are, we know where you live. I can tell you all of our families feel a greatly heightened sense. And just let me just say, my heart goes out to the families in Minnesota. How horrific for the whole country, but in particularly we're holding the folks in Minnesota in our hearts.
Yeah, no place in this country for political violence of any kind.
And right now, we are in the portion of this case where people are trying to point fingers at one another. Somehow, Donald Trump is being tied into this as far as his political rhetoric.
Given, this is also not a normal question, because I'm going to ask it about the Department of Justice, which heretofore, prior to this administration, it's always been held that the Department of Justice is an apolitical body. Do you see it as such now? And if you don't, the fact that these are two Democratic lawmakers that have been attacked, one killed and one right now fighting for his life in a hospital after being shot multiple times, do you have any doubt, any concern that because of political differences, biases, this will not be addressed the way it should be?
It should be apolitical, right? That's what we have seen from Republican and Democratic administrations up until this one. Right now, Donald Trump has in place people who are more loyal to him than they are to the Constitution and the rule of law. And what really, if I can rewind the tape, if I can, just 4 months ago, we saw this president pardon violent January 6 offenders, people who were convicted.
1,500 of them.
1,500. He just pardoned them. That, to me, normalized political violence. These are people, Alex, that he summoned to Washington. He told them, come to D.C. We'll be wild, he says in a tweet. And they come to Washington at his behest. They come with their zip ties. They come with their weapons. They come with their bear spray. And he tells them to march down to the Capitol and to fight like hell. And they do exactly that until he tells them to stop. And so now he gets back in office and he pardons them. That, to me, is the normalization of political violence. And
I can understand why you say it that way, absolutely.
All right, so there you go. I'm only showing you guys those clips and the totality of those clips so you can see we go from talking about the Minnesota case to taking quite the curve to talking about Donald Trump. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Make sure to please subscribe, please like. Thank you guys for being here. God bless, and we'll see you all later.